Welcome to another edition of the Camel Clutch Blog Extra, where we take a look at the hot topics this week in professional wrestling. And as always, I am joined by my favorite co-host. He is the host himself of Between the Ropes and a writer for Fox Sports and SportingNews.com, respectively, Brian Fritz. Brian, welcome back.
I'm just glad that I'm now the favorite. I like that tag.
Well, it was either you or nobody else. But,
okay.
Yeah. But you're still the favorite.
A lot of competition out there.
A lot of competition out there. But no, I mean, you and I have been doing this since the late 90s, and always a good time sitting down and talking with you. But yes, so Brian, it is a big week. It is Survivor Series week, but a story that has evolved into a much bigger story is this whole WWE Divas contract signing angle that went down on Monday Night Raw with Charlotte and Paige. Now, originally, when I wrote a blog about this Tuesday, the morning after, I wasn't offended by it. A lot of people were. A lot of people called it tasteless. A lot of people called it disgusting. A lot of people were offended. I wasn't offended by it because at the time, I made a lot of presumptions, and my presumption was if it's okay with Charlotte and it's okay with the rest of the Flair family, then it's okay by me, because who am I to get offended over something like that? And everybody deals with grief differently. I've also lost a brother in recent years, so I certainly have a lot of empathy and sympathy for what Charlotte is going through, and people deal with grief differently. So my original take was, you know what? Not only was it just not a good angle, I didn't think it was a very productive angle in selling the match, but I wasn't offended by it. But now we're talking 2 days later, and Ric Flair went on his podcast, and he said he was never notified about it. He was very hesitant to come out outright and criticize it, but the way that he described it on his podcast, he said that Charlotte's in a position where she's afraid to say no, and he cried, Rick cried, nobody told him about it, nobody even called him afterwards to check on him and to see if it was okay, and then on top of that, making matters even worse, or just unraveling this mystery even more, there is a report from Brandon Stroud on Uprocks that says that Charlotte was the one that pitched the idea to the writer. So a couple of different elements here, Brian, I'd like to get your thoughts on. One, Rick is saying on his podcast that nobody's contacted him before or after. Number two, he's on his podcast saying that Charlotte couldn't say no. So either one of two things is happening. Either Uprocks has it wrong, or Charlotte had this idea and she hasn't even contacted him yet to talk about it. And just your thoughts on the angle itself.
Well, it's funny because I saw that thing from Brandon, and then I know Mike Johnson at PW Insider has refuted that and had said, no, it wasn't Charlotte's idea. It was one that got pitched to her, and she had said, okay, I'll do it. But, like you mentioned and Rick had said on his podcast, it was something that she just can't refuse right now, considering her position in the company.
Right.
When I saw the angle, I was very, very uncomfortable. And I'm okay with some edgy storylines, and I think that wrestling is better when they do that, but I think it has to deal with that person right there. I don't like it too much when it delves too much into family, like kids, or especially when it comes to somebody that's already passed. That's why even go back to the storyline they did, 10 years ago with Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero after Eddie had passed away. That was very uncomfortable. So that was one of the problems I had with it, was they were bringing up this storyline of, Reed passing, and I just thought it was unnecessary. I thought it was something that was done very cheap and salacious and done just to try to get people talking and not for the right reasons. It didn't get the right kind of heat. Plus, on top of that, if you look at the state of WWE right now, and they'll sit there and they'll say, this is sports entertainment. It's not anything that's different from a drama or a soap opera that's out there, but at the same time, they're trying to promote family-friendly product and PG-rated content, and it totally goes against that. What was really strange, too, is on a night where WWE showed a lot of class with the moment of silence to open up the show for the victims in Paris, and then later on, while they didn't show the video package for the passing of Bob Backlund, the announcers did talk about it.
Bob Backlund, whoa!
I mean, not Nick Bockwinkel, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry about that, Mr. Backlund.
Yeah.
But they talk about the passing and, what a great gentleman, a great champion he was. And then they close the show with a very edgy, controversial angle like this. It just seems so out of place.
Yeah. I don't want to be a hypocrite because I've gone on your podcast, and when you and I had a real lengthy discussion about what needs to change when they had low ratings, my point of view was that they needed more edginess. They need to be more edgy, kind of like the Attitude Era, but not quite. And this certainly was edgy, and I don't mind edgy, especially in the PG-13, in the PG era. I think it's welcomed. I just, I look at the angle, and I watched the angle just like everybody else did, and I just didn't see the purpose. If you, meaning a WWE writer, somebody in charge of creative, could pitch me why they needed to do that and what the objective was, then maybe I would understand it better. But for starters, for the casual audience watching at home, and I mean casual audience such as like, kids. I mean, my nieces watch Raw, and they're kids. That's the casual audience at home. They know nothing about Ric Flair. Now, sure, they'll go on Google the next day or Wikipedia or whatever, but they know nothing about Ric Flair. So I don't really understand where they were going, and I think that if it was their idea, it's almost sick because, you watch Rick and Charlotte talk about Reed, and they're obviously still in a lot of pain. I was watching, I don't know if you saw that Table for Three recently, that it had Charlotte and Tamina and Natalya on there, and Reed came up, and Charlotte broke down, and quite honestly, I don't think she recovered throughout the entire Table for Three. She lost her place on Monday when she was talking about it. So obviously this girl is dealing with a lot of pain right now. And it almost, Brian, and I'm curious for your thoughts on this. Charlotte said something during that promo where she said the only reason she's there is for Reed. And, I might be reading way too much into this and going on the idea that it wasn't her idea. It's almost as if she's saying, I'm only doing this because, for Reed. I'm not doing this for anybody else. And almost like giving the finger, to the company. But I just don't even see what the objective was, Brian, in what's it going to sell?
Yeah, that's the whole thing, too. You're sitting going, does this make you more interested in getting Survivor Series?
Right.
Does this make you more interested in the match that they have? And to me, no. I know WWE might even go as far as, well, we keep talking about this Divas Revolution and you want more women. So what are you complaining about? Because we gave them an edgy storyline. People said they want more edgy content. We're giving you more of the women. We put them in the main event slot. But I think there needs to be an addendum that goes with that from a standpoint of you can be edgy, but there needs to be a better purpose to it. And there's a difference between going over the line and jumping over the line. And the other thing is, too, when it comes to the women, that's great. You want to do more with them. But, this came out of nowhere. I mean, they didn't even promote that this was in the main event slot. It's just they just kept promoting the contract signing was coming up. And as the show went on, you kept waiting for it. And then out of nowhere, it's 10:45 on the East Coast, and they're coming back from break, and you're like, oh, wait, the contract signing is actually in the final segment of the show.
Yeah.
Which was really strange because you would think that's where they're going to put the match with Roman Reigns and Cesaro. But that was long gone.
Yeah.
And it was weird about that. I mean, I was watching that match and it kind of hit me going, okay, are they doing the Del Rio Kalisto match on SmackDown?
Yeah. I was kind of thinking the same thing.
I was like, what's going on here, man? They still got that match to go.
Yeah.
And I guess they were just focused on, hey, let's focus on these first 2 hours and hopefully get a little bit of an overrun. And if we can keep people for a third hour, great. If not, the third hour's been tanking lately anyway. So it was I just thought that it was, a little bit too much of everything, that, okay, you want to be edgy, you want to be controversial, fine. But I thought this went a bit too far, especially from what has been their norm. And then the same thing with the women. It's just like, you want to do one more, that fine. But I think you've got to gradually build and educate the audience rather than just throw it in there and assume it's going to be accepted and people are going to go crazy for it.
Yeah, and I mean, it takes I gotta be honest, it takes a real sick person to even pitch this idea, whether it came from the top or somebody else, to know how emotional she is about her brother, and then to even just to have that idea, just to pitch that idea. I mean, it takes a really sick person, but I want to talk about just the whole aspect that nobody even contacted Ric Flair. His ex-wife Beth posted a tweet, which obviously wasn't very complimentary. And I mean, just the fact that on Rick's podcast, he mentioned 2 or 3 times that Stephanie, Michael Hayes, and Triple H have her back. He mentioned it like 2 or 3 times. He mentioned that, which I thought was kind of weird that he mentioned it so many times. And here's a guy we've heard about for so long, that Hunter and Rick are supposed to be close. So obviously Hunter and Rick being so close, Stephanie and Rick are going to be close. They know about how much hurt this guy has for his son, and for nobody to call this guy beforehand or even after. I mean, I know they're busy. They don't even have to call him. They could have somebody else call him. But for nobody to contact him, I really think that's inexcusable.
Yeah, and that's what's weird. And I mean, I know that they might have this mindset of, well, Rick knows it's the wrestling business, but this is something that's personal to him. This isn't just we're doing some kind of strange angle with your daughter. We're talking about your son that's involved in this. We're talking about her brother.
And let me cut you off for a second. It's your daughter and your son, because we're talking about your son and your daughter, who's having an obviously a hard time dealing with this, is being put in that position. So it's both of your kids.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can try to explain it to Rick, and I think it's a weak explanation. I'm saying why we didn't tell him in advance. But when you're dealing with Elizabeth, who, yes, she was around the wrestling business because her husband was in it, but hell, she wasn't in the business herself, Yeah. I mean, and then to have to go through this again, when it comes to her son passing and being thrown out there on television to be exploited for a wrestling angle. I mean, and she's not even asked about it. I mean, what are they going to do? Ask her and she's going to say no, and they're going to be like, well, we're going to do it anyway. That might have been their mentality, saying, well, we're doing it anyway. We're not asking for permission. We're just giving you a heads up. And if she had gotten a heads up, she might have gone public with it, going, oh, wait till you see what they're going to do with my daughter tonight, and they're going to bring up my dead son, So, but I mean, to me, it's still not excusable. Maybe that's another reason, why they shouldn't have done it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just closing this segment out, Rick on his podcast said that by the time they get to Survivor Series, it'll be water under the bridge. But I don't know, it's one of these things. And again, we have conflicting reports about whether it was Charlotte's idea or not. And if it was her idea, I mean, it's a completely different animal in my opinion. But, for somebody like Charlotte, who obviously loves wrestling, but, didn't have this burning desire to get into the wrestling business until she was there on that WrestleMania weekend. And then, of course, the tragedy that struck her family, which inspired her to get into the business. I mean, at some point, I have to wonder if she's just going to say enough's enough and walk, because, I don't know her. I've never met her, but she seems to be a pretty level-headed girl. People that I do know have a lot of nice things to say about her. And I just wonder if at one point she's just going to get up and say, you know what, this just isn't for me. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see that. I mean, I don't know her, but I mean, I've met her on 2 different occasions and sat down and had conversations with her, which have been for, the website. And she's always been super pleasant, especially this past year at WrestleMania. I got to talk to her on the Friday before Mania, and we had a nice conversation even after the podcast, after we got done doing an interview, and just talking to her. And one of the people that was with me, is from North Carolina. So they were striking up a conversation that I kind of started, and, we were all joking around about different things. And she's great to talk to. I mean, I haven't heard anybody ever say anything really bad about her.
Yeah, me neither.
So, I mean, we'll see how this affects her going forward, because if it's not her idea, does this bring about a level of distrust between her and management and creative, So, and it's funny because, Rick says, oh, I'll be forgotten about by Survivor Series. And the thing is, to me, he's probably right, because come the end of the day, the wrestling business gets treated differently. If this was some other kind of show, especially like a reality or show or something, it might linger around. But there are still a lot of people. Some of them are ardent wrestling fans. A lot of them are just kind of, I'll tune in every now and then, or maybe they're not even wrestling fans at all. But they'll be like, oh, well, That's wrestling. That's what they do over there. That's why it's that dirty little business, that, some people like, but they're all a bunch of nerds and, live in their mom's basement.
What?
Or, different things like that. There's that stereotype that goes along with wrestling, and this just kind of feeds into that stereotype when they do a storyline like this.
Yeah. And, again, just, and maybe, and you're absolutely right. But to people like you and I and the hardcore followers of the business that have watched Charlotte and Rick talk about, their Reed's passing and see how emotionally, broken down they are about it. I think it hits them harder. For a casual fan, if you told them the story, but you haven't seen them cry, and you haven't seen that emotion, you'd think, oh, it's wrestling. But, again, there's this other side. Like I said, I was just watching her break down on Table for Three a couple of days ago. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, moving on. Another newsworthy part of Raw was Roman Reigns and Cesaro, and you mentioned that. Great match. It's got to be right up there with one of the best that Reigns has had in his singles career. Right up there with the Brock match and the Daniel Bryan match from Fastlane. I think that it really helped Cesaro quite a bit. I think it helped both guys. And, I think this is one of those situations where in losing, Cesaro was helped because he just looked so strong. I mean, people talk about WWE keeping Cesaro down all the time. And believe me, they haven't exactly given him the ball, but they really went out of their way to make him look strong in that matchup on Monday night. And I think he came away from it looking better. And, I was reading Mike Mooneyham, the famed wrestling journalist, after Cesaro hit the backslide for the close three. And Mike Mooneyham on his Facebook said, what if Cesaro had scored the upset with that backslide? So that's my question to you, Brian. What if Cesaro did score that win with the backslide? And do you think that Cesaro came out positioned better after the loss?
Well, I definitely think he came out better, in the loss. That's the weird thing, is that he's looked better for a while now, and he's been losing a lot. But this was one that was a little bit different than, the typical 3 or 4 minute match, because there were those little openings where going into the match, you didn't believe he was going to win. But there definitely were those glimpses of hope during the match where you really thought, what if he did win? What if they feel like everybody knows what's going to happen and they want to shake it up and they've got a different idea for it, because it's not really going to hurt Reigns necessarily. And, we can go with what the crowd wants when it comes to Cesaro. That would have been extremely interesting, though, if Cesaro had won, because to me, I think that changes the whole dynamic of everything. Then I don't even think necessarily Dean Ambrose makes the finals.
Yeah.
I think then you get a Kevin Owens Cesaro final, which would get a lot of buzz, online. I mean, I can sit here and talk about the audience like us. That probably makes up for what? We talked about this before.
Minuscule.
15% of the audience now or something. But still, there's a lot of other people that I think would be still very interested in that match, because for the most part, they've done a good job with Kevin Owens. And I think there is something to this rising tide when it comes to support for Cesaro, and things that they can still capitalize on. They sit there and they talk about he doesn't have charisma or he doesn't have this or that. But you know what? They never give him an opportunity to talk. People are getting behind him, by doing the Cesaro section, and you hear more buzz about him, not only when you go to wrestling shows, but obviously online. So, I mean, there's something there, and I hope that they can capitalize on this, going forward. I mean, give this guy some more opportunities. See what the crowd does, because obviously they talk about we do what the audience wants. And we all know that's only true to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you got to be hit over the head with a hammer before that happens in a lot of cases. But you know what? That hammer is about to come out here, I think, with Cesaro.
What's funny, and I don't see this happening at all, but if you think about the prototypical authority member, the prototypical wrestler that the authority are looking to have as the face of the company, Cesaro fits it better than anybody available on the active roster right now. I mean, the guy is clean cut. The guy is well spoken. The guy is intelligent. The guy is articulate. The guy is arguably the best wrestler, quote unquote wrestler in the company. It's just ironic because I don't see them ever going down that road, but yet if you're going to give the script to somebody that's not affiliated politically with the WWE and show them the program and say, pick out the next authority member, I think Cesaro fits the bill.
Cesaro fits the bill. I think Roman Reigns fits the bill. I really do. But I don't think they're going to do it with Reigns. I mean, to me, if you really look at the long term, and I'm talking about the next 6 months, when it comes to where they should position everybody and how they should go forward, especially with the injuries that they have. And even when Cena comes back, and even when Rollins comes back, if you really want to drag it out, the best laid scenario is turning Reigns heel, because then you've got this guy that when you put him in a suit, he looks fantastic, and he can be this authority figure, and say, I got the money, I got the power, I got the gold. It's almost like a modern day, and I'm not going to say they book him like Ric Flair, but it's kind of like this modern day version of Rick,
I would love to see Cesaro dropping elbows and strutting around in suits and ripping
well, you
clothes.
can do that with Cesaro, but I think Reigns would be even the better
I meant
option.
Reigns. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Reigns.
But I mean, but you have Reigns, but I wouldn't have him act like Flair, but I mean, from a standpoint of the moves or anything, or wooing, of course, but, and don't change his hair to blonde. But he could be kind of that guy that everybody just hates in that role because you feel like he's got it all. And guess what? He sets up a feud immediately with Ambrose. It sets up a feud immediately with Cesaro. And then, he can win at the Rumble defending the title, and Brock Lesnar could come out of the Rumble, win that thing. And then Reigns can be like, oh, crap, here I go. I got to face this guy again, So you've got that. And then when Seth Rollins comes back, he's going to be a babyface, especially if Reigns is the heel. They miss a top heel right now, and the best choice that they have is sitting right in front of them with Roman Reigns, but I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they're going to turn him for a variety of reasons, one of which is the amount of merchandise that dude sells, because he's number 2 in merch. And then on top of that, they just have a plan for how they want to use him. So, okay, who's going to be the top heel then? Are you going to turn Ambrose? I don't think that's going to work as well. Cesaro would definitely be a choice, and I'd be curious about that. But I don't think the crowd would really take to that too much, because I think the crowd still wants to cheer him and get behind him, and I think it would be, people would still cheer for him even as a heel, but that's not the effect that you want.
Right. All right. You jumped into it. Let's talk Survivor Series and Survivor Series picks. Of course, the elephant in the room, Roman Reigns, whether he goes heel or not, and joins the Authority. I'm presuming, listening to you, that you say no, that he is not turning heel at Survivor Series. Do you think he leaves with the WWE Championship?
I don't. I think Ambrose does, and I think he's the one that turns heel. And I think they make Reigns chase the title a little bit longer. I think originally he was going to win it here. That was, everybody has said that was the plan, but that was chasing Seth Rollins, which has been going on for a little while. So I think he's got to chase it a little bit longer. I think Ambrose is the guy that turns heel, but I think that's going to be awkward. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be aligned with the Authority, but he could be. I hope they don't do that from a standpoint of trying to put Dean Ambrose in a suit. Yeah. I mean, that's like akin to putting Stone Cold in a suit back in the day.
Right.
I mean, Reigns, to me, answers a lot of different issues that they have right now, but I just don't think they're going to do it. And I think they're going to pull the trigger with Ambrose.
What they're doing here with Reigns is very interesting. If you look at the bracketing of this tournament, he wrestled Cesaro on Monday night, a match that got both guys over. I think that earned Reigns a little respect from the wrestling community, so to speak, out there. He'll have Alberto Del Rio in the semifinals, which, I have no reason to believe that it won't be a very good match, won't be solid. And
there's no mask for him to pull off in this match.
There's no mask for him to pull off in this one. And then you have Dean Ambrose and Kevin Owens. I'm sorry, Dean Ambrose, Kevin Owens, and you have that winner wrestling Roman Reigns. Either one of those matches are going to be great. So, it's one of these deals where, one of the knocks against Roman is that the hardcore audience just didn't think he was that good. They love their Daniel Bryans. They love their CM Punks. They love their Kevin Owens, their Dolph Zigglers, but they don't see Roman Reigns or John Cena, although I think that's changed a little bit with Cena, as that wrestler that they like. But I think that the company has really positioned him to change that narrative with his path to the WWE title.
I think a lot more people have been won over by Reigns, and it's because of the work that he's done in the ring. Maybe that's why that they even did the brackets the way that they did. You know, you go back to WrestleMania, like you said, he had a really, really good match with Brock Lesnar. And go back to even just a month ago, the Hell in a Cell match with Bray Wyatt. I thought that won a lot of people over, too, because that was one of those, we're going to go out there and we're going to beat the crap out of one another. And they had a really good match, and I think people will appreciate that, going, you know what, he might be the pretty boy, and they've got a certain idea what they want to use for him, but when he needs to go out there and get his hands dirty, he will do it. And, you know, the match he had with Cesaro was very good as well. So I think that's how WWE is trying to get the audience behind him, saying, you know what, there's going to be a certain pocket that's just not going to like this guy anyway. They're just not going to. So let's try to win everybody over by showing that he's really, really good in the ring. I mean, I still think that one of the problems that they have with Roman, that they even, got in their way a little bit on Monday, was these long promos. You know, you've got to keep his promos to 2, 3, 4 minutes. These longer promos, they're going to kill the guy, because I think he's charismatic. I think he can talk. I think he's horrible at reciting scripts.
He's horrible. You know, what was great about him in the Shield were those brief verbiage, which was more of a snarl than him talking, and they're really missing that.
It's like with Charlotte. I think Charlotte is really good. I think she can cut a promo, but it's got to be shorter. But when she has to recite a script, I don't think she's very good at it.
Yeah, it's a tough deal. I don't want to belabor the entire Survivor Series card, because, quite honestly, we
don't know what the entire card is, because they won't tell us.
We don't know what the entire card is, and there are more important things to talk about. But real quickly, anything you see coming out of Undertaker and Kane against the Wyatts, you see anything being set up with Undertaker and Strowman, or you think it's just going to be a squash? What do you see here?
You know, I'd love to see them do more with Bray Wyatt, but with the way that they've done this entire feud so far, I don't want to see any more between these two factions. I really don't. I'm afraid of Taker against Strowman at WrestleMania, which I think would be a huge mistake. I don't want to see that. You know what? I have a lot of respect for both Kane and Taker for everything that they've done. But when they came out on Raw on Monday night, and they're doing the whole light show and everything, and they're making their way to the ring, I couldn't get the thought out of their mind of, like, these dudes are just old.
Yeah.
They look old. They didn't look fit. That doesn't mean they're not good wrestlers, but I mean, you always think about, Kane's this big muscular monster and Taker's this bigger than life character. And when they came out there, and Taker for whatever reason didn't even have his coat and hat on, but they just looked like a couple of middle-aged older guys, and they looked like guys that would fit that age. You know, they're between 40 and 50 years old. They're not going to be, they're muscular, but they got a little bit of extra weight on them. They're moving a little bit slower. They're looking a little bit older in the face. I mean, they look like normal guys, and they don't look like this bigger than life characters that they were made out to be.
Yeah. Agreed 100%. And my pick, I do think Reigns winds up winning the title at Survivor Series, and I do think that he goes heel for a lot of the reasons that you
I hope you're right, man.
Mentioned earlier. Yes, it happens every once in a while.
I like it. You're keeping the faith, man. You staying positive.
I am trying. It is all positivity. I mean, it's the holiday season. If you can't say positive now, when can you be positive?
That's the power of positivity. I'm glad you're enforcing it. PSA,
as Bob Backlund would say after every email. PSA, positive something. PMA, I'm sorry. Positive mental attitude.
Positive mental attitude, sure.
Positive mental attitude, yes. Let's talk a little WrestleMania 32. You talked a little bit about it when you were analyzing Roman Reigns and where he goes from here. There was a report in the Wrestling Observer that the main event, penciled in anyway at least, was Roman Reigns against John Cena. A match I predicted on the Camel Clutch blog, but all of a sudden now has legs. Another report came out that said The Rock, as of now, cannot wrestle due to an insurance liability issue. However, there was a caveat in there, is that if he could clear it up, maybe he does wrestle. Ronda Rousey, obviously out. She's not going to be on the show. What do you think? Do you think that we're going to see Rock in the ring? Do you see? Oh, and another report, Brian, was that Seth Rollins wasn't even figured into any of the main matches, which kind of goes against previous reports that I read that he was penciled in against Triple H. So, I mean, in your between the ropes crystal ball, what do you see here? And what do you think about Reigns and Cena? Let me just say this about Reigns and Cena. One thing that I have noticed over the years is that when the WWE, when Vince McMahon has a WrestleMania main event in his mind, and it's in his mind in November, it winds up staying in his mind in April. When you hear rumors of these matches, and sometimes people say, oh no, that could never happen, they always wind up happening. So I do think that happens. What do you think?
Well, it's something I hadn't really even thought about too much before, but I guess it makes sense. Maybe they just don't like the idea of doing back-to-back years of Reigns against Lesnar. Mm-hmm. So, but the only reason that I really believed in that match, because I was looking at, okay, who would match up with Lesnar then? Yeah. Where would they take him? Because, okay, the world title match, that's going to be one of the biggest matches. If you get The Rock, that's going to be a huge match. And then if you have Lesnar in another match, to me, that's your top three matches. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about Seth Rollins, okay, he wasn't factored into one of those top matches. But that still could have been Triple H because, that's still going to be a match I think people would like to see, but it's not going to be billed as one of the top three matches on the show. It could have been The Undertaker, quite honestly, because Undertaker is an attraction, but it's not going to be as big as it once was because the streak is dead.
Yeah.
So maybe that was where they were going to go, was Rollins against Taker, and now that's out the door. So, I mean, from their logic, I can understand Reigns and Cena, especially if Reigns goes into that match as the champion and he's still a babyface. Because then they'll be like, we'll get that organic audience, where they're going to pick their favorites. Do they want Cena? Do they want Reigns? And there's enough people that don't like Cena anyway that they'll root for anybody else. That means I'll have to go for Roman. And this will kind of be the, passing the baton kind of moment, I guess, from Cena's, still going to be obviously a big part of the company, but he's handing over the top spot to Reigns, mm-hmm. In their minds. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I just don't know where the other parts fit. I mean, where do you put Lesnar? Where do you put, if you can get The Rock to wrestle, where do you put Rock? I mean, I guess Rock against Triple H would still make a lot of sense if they can make that match happen, because right now Triple H doesn't have a dance partner either because of the situation with Rock and also with Rollins being on the shelf.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily discount Rollins being out of WrestleMania. They said 6 to 9 months, and every once in a while they skew those numbers to cover up any surprise returns. I haven't heard that he would be back, but I don't think it's, I wouldn't completely write him off yet. And with the Brock thing, what's really interesting about that, Brian, is that they had this match with Brock and Undertaker scheduled, penciled in for WrestleMania. Then all of a sudden, Vince McMahon reportedly had this new idea. And in order to put Brock in that new match at Mania, he expedited the series with Undertaker at Hell in a Cell and at SummerSlam, having to pay Brock Lesnar a lot more money for those extra dates that he didn't originally have him for. So it's quite an investment right there. So he obviously must have some grand idea that is so worthwhile he was willing to make the investment to bring Brock in for some extra dates in the fall. But who that is, it's really anybody's guess at this point.
Yeah, I have no idea. And the funny thing is, so Brock got this new deal earlier in the year, obviously, to remain with WWE. He's redone that deal twice now. Twice. He's redone that deal to get more dates added. Yeah. Because he's doing some house shows in January. Yeah. As well. So they want to use him more. Brock's like, fine, if you want to pay for the nose, I'll be there. Yeah. But as I sit here right now, I have no earthly idea who they would put Brock Lesnar against. Because you can't tell me that they're planning on Daniel Bryan, because we still don't know what the health is of Daniel. And even if he was healthy enough, would they really want to put Daniel Bryan in there with all the nervousness that they already have against the most physical guy in the company? I mean, I'd love to see that match. I don't think they would necessarily. Would a Brock Lesnar Kevin Owens match at that point sell and something that they would look at? What about a Dean Ambrose match? Maybe. I have no idea.
Yeah. Wrapping up with a couple of quick topics here. So my old ECW colleague Taz has made some news because according to the Tasmaniac, he believes that the Ronda Rousey Holly Holm UFC fight was a fix. Now, I don't really want to get into too much UFC because I think it's a different audience. But, in my opinion, he can't be that stupid. He's a guy that has, somewhat of a little bit of a mixed martial arts background. He's very knowledgeable of mixed martial arts. He can't be that stupid. And, as far as a fix, it's impossible, what are you going to do? Say, we're going to kick you in the side of the head, make sure that you don't wake up. We're going to batter your face to the point that you're going to need plastic surgery on your lips. It's just impossible. It's not like she got cold cocked. It's not like we're talking about a GSP Matt Serra upset. Do you think that he's that this is calculated and he's just looking to get some news, or do you think he really feels this way and he's lost his mind?
Well, and you know this too, being around wrestlers. How many times have you had a conversation with them and you try to talk about mainstream sports? And
Dozens.
And wrestlers say, "Oh man, what a work that was!"
Dozens.
What a work that was. We
Yes.
know that the refs were in on the fix on that game because they wanted to extend the playoff series, to another round, or they did this because they're going to have a rematch later in the year. Which is one of the most conversations that drives me insane when I talk to some of these guys, to where I just don't talk sports with any wrestlers that I know for the most part, if they're going to have that mentality. I was really disappointed in Taz in doing that. I get it. There's a lot of people that still have the mentality, and somewhat right, in that they want to get people talking. They want to do something that's going to push buttons and, get more people interested, and sometimes it will get people more interested in talking about that subject. Would that translate into more people actually, listening to your show more? That remains to be seen. But either way, to me, it was disappointing from a standpoint that you are saying this just to get a spotlight on yourself, and it's kind of a desperate ploy, or you're doing it because you do believe it. And like you said, it's asinine to think that way for a variety of reasons. And his whole argument to me was bad, because he sits there and talks about, well, they knew she was going to be gone until July. So it means no one was going to have the belt or no one was going to defend the belt for the next, 7 months. How many times have we seen this in UFC where somebody hasn't defended the belt for a period of time that's 5, 6, 7 months?
I think Cain Velasquez went like 2 years before he defended the belt.
Right. And you can make the argument too, well, then they create an interim title. That's still an interim title.
Right.
Whether you want to put it on the same level. But I've seen plenty of times where somebody has been injured in training and they, so they didn't create an interim title, but nobody defended that title for 7, 8, 9 months, or even where somebody said, I'm going to take a break because I just had 3 fights in a row over the last 18 months. So now I'm going to take 6 months off. That happens. And on top of that, why would Ronda Rousey ever agree to take a fall, and to lose? That hurts her brand. UFC can sit there and say, well, the rematch is going to be the biggest rematch ever. That show, UFC 200, was already going to be the biggest show that they've ever had, whether she was defending the title or whether she was going for the title. So maybe it'll be bigger now, but I don't think it's going to be that much different. She's been their top star, and now she's been blemished. And it hurts UFC from a business standpoint a little bit, I think, but it definitely hurts the Ronda Rousey brand, because now she's not this unbeatable person. The
aura is gone.
Right. You can withstand one loss as long as you come back immediately and you win it back in the role that she's been in. But if she does not win the championship back, or if she wins it like on some kind of a weird fluky finish, then it doesn't restore her aura, and it damages her brand. Because, why do you think she's gotten all these different opportunities, whether it's been on magazine covers or she's in movies or whatever things that she's done?
My wife knows her just from watching her on Ellen. My wife doesn't watch this. She knows her from watching her on Ellen.
By the way, these people that hate Ronda Rousey going, oh, she's got an attitude and she's this and she's that. I'm like, I don't know if she does or not, but I don't really care if she does because she's in that position. She's obviously worked hard and she's earned the things that she's gotten. What's she supposed to do? Turn down these opportunities? Yeah. And I think she's done some great things as well when it comes to being a positive role model for women, but also for kids. I mean, she's done. I think for the most part she has. I mean, there's some things I know that people get all, uppity about, but I don't understand why there has been so much hatred for Ronda Rousey and people there's some people that are so happy that she lost now. I mean, I think it's a bit of the arrogance. I think people see her, when she wouldn't shake hands with Holly Holm. I mean, she wouldn't shake hands after the fight with Misha Tate, but Misha Tate is different than Holly Holm. Holly Holm is from. But don't you think it's a little bit different too if it was a guy? From a guy, we're like, oh man, how about that? They don't shake hands because they know this is a business and they don't have to like each other and everything like that. But I think it could be a little bit of a difference when it comes to women going, oh, why is she being so catty?
She's a lot like Brock Lesnar, in my opinion, in the UFC.
Right?
In that Brock would give the finger and Brock wouldn't shake hands, and the MMA crowds hated him for a while, but they certainly wanted to buy his fights and watch him with the hopes that he would get beat, and he was the biggest draw that they had. I don't know what Ronda's numbers are, but I'm assuming that Ronda's probably outdrawn him just from the sheer number of fights she's had compared to his career span. But
sure.
It's a lot like Brock Lesnar in that they love to hate him.
I don't think she's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think she's earned what she's gotten. I don't think she's evil. She's not perfect, but she's not evil. And going back to the whole thing about, with Taz and everything. Okay, she loses this one. She's got to win the next one because guess what? You lose twice. You're not going to be the person that people call when it comes to we've got this role in this big movie and you're the top women's draw. That is going to be gone. I mean, it's still there now. The one loss isn't going to cripple her. She's still the movies that she's got planned. She's still going to be doing them. But another one, and that destroys her aura, and it puts a huge dent, in her brand. I mean, people bring up Gina Carano, and Gina was a great fighter. She's great for the time that she was out there. I think she's become a really good actor. But you don't see Gina Carano getting, the same kind of roles that Ronda Rousey is, because Ronda is the woman right now.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, my wife knows her from Ellen. I'm in the drugstore picking up a prescription. I see her at the counter on the cover of some women's magazine or something. I mean, it's just, but on top of that, so again, not going down too much UFC here, but wrapping up the UFC talk. You have your loss to Holly Holm, then they rematch. So let's say they rematch and she loses again to Holly Holm. So then what's next for Ronda Rousey at that point? So the logical trajectory in my mind is a fight with Cyborg, because by that point, Cyborg has had plenty of time to cut weight, and Cyborg and Ronda, I mean, that's it at that point. If she loses again, the money's gone. At least at that point, you could still salvage that rivalry. And there's a pretty good possibility that Cyborg beats her as well. So then you're talking 0-3 at that point. And at that rate, I kind of think she retires.
Yeah, and that's when I think people would question, was she just a fluke, and would question the opponents that she had. What the funny thing about Cyborg is? So Cyborg, was very happy to see Ronda lose.
Which is stupid, which makes no sense to me.
To me, it's just that was a huge paycheck that just got flushed down the toilet.
Yeah.
Right there, because you want her being unbeaten, and you want to be the person that has the opportunity to hand her, her first loss.
She'll never be the first one to beat her anymore.
Right. It's not going to mean as much. That's why it means so much right now for Holly Holm.
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody would accuse Cyborg of being a smart businesswoman when you look at the, her career choices that she's made over the last couple of years.
There's a lot of different choices she's made that have been
questionable
to say the least, and she's still got to be able to cut weight. I mean, to get to that fight. I mean, I guess the talk is now that she's got a nutritionist and she's working on it and she's really serious about it. But it's where was this, 3 years ago?
Exactly. And she's got to do it hypothetically for the next year and a half, 2 years, because, it's easy. It's not easy, but it's easier for her to cut weight knowing, okay, I'm going to fight Ronda in July of next year. But now Ronda's going to fight in July of that year. She might not fight again for another 6 or 7 months at that point. So, Cyborg has to maintain that nutrition for that amount of time. I mean, it's a different ballgame at this rate.
Yeah, and plus she's older. That's why I said if she had done it 3 or 4 years ago, you would think it would be easier. But as you get older, it's tougher to keep that weight off. Don't
I know it? Finally, Brian, as I always say, we'll only be about 20 or 30 minutes, and we're about 40 minutes into this thing. Finally, the great Nick Bockwinkel passed away this week. I have some thoughts. I have some experiences with Nick. I want to ask you, you ever interviewed Nick and just your memories of watching Nick, thoughts on Nick?
I never got to interview Nick. I met him very, very briefly one time at a convention where before anybody was doing autograph signings, he was actually at a booth next to me having breakfast. And once he was done eating, I introduced myself to him. And I actually got a picture, which turned out to be blurry, and I didn't keep it. But it was a picture with Nick and with Pat Patterson.
Oh, interesting.
It would have been fantastic if the person that took the picture knew what they were doing. But, he's such a gentleman. I mean, you never hear anybody say anything bad about Nick. To me, he was a champion's champion, and that he knew how to, handle that role of being a champion. I think that when you talk about professional wrestling, that he was the ultimate professional when it came to how he handled the business, how he did his business. He was just one of these all-around great guys that loved the business and loved his role in it, and knew how to handle himself, knew how to do things the right way.
Yeah. I interviewed Nick for a shoot interview. I actually sat down with him for about 3 hours for a shoot interview. Gosh, I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago. It may have even been longer. And he was awesome. Not only was he nice and gentlemanly and articulate, but he was just he had so many great stories. And what I thought was fascinating, and I said this to him when we were talking, both on and off camera, I said what's fascinating is, Nick grew up around the business. His dad was in the business, Warren Bockwinkel.
Yeah.
And Nick was kind of one of those last ones that had a lineage to that era, in that Nick could talk about all these stories of all these old time wrestlers that nobody had any experience talking about. These guys that were hanging around with Nick when he was a kid with his dad. Nick had stories about these guys that nobody alive at this point has as many stories on the guys from that era as Nick did. And while some people probably watched that shoot interview and might have been a little disappointed because I kind of focused in on that area, I thought it was fascinating just listening to these stories about these guys that you've read about and heard about, but nobody alive has had any experiences with them. And talking about the ribs from that era, I just thought he was great. But as a fan, I read about him in magazines when I was younger. I started watching wrestling in '82, so he was larger than life in the after mags, the quote unquote after mags. And then as I got older, I watched more of Nick on tape, and he was on ESPN when AWA went on ESPN, and I loved him as a promo. I put him up there as maybe top 5 of all time. I look at his AWA promos, and they're just awesome, especially the ones in Memphis during his feud with Jerry Lawler. just brilliant stuff. And I think if there's any shame, it's that when the WWF expanded, in '84 and '85, that Nick wasn't, 5 to 7 years younger and couldn't have been a part of that, because I think he would have been great as one of those transitional guys like a Terry Funk and a Harley Race, and helping these younger guys and feuding with Hogan on a big scale like that. I think he would have been awesome. I think he got a lot of great matches out of Hogan. I think that it's a shame he wasn't able to be a part of that era, just so more people could see him and experience how great he was.
What's weird that we never saw him, in that company, and we never even saw him have a bigger role when it came to the NWA. But that was by his choice, though, because he just didn't want to be a guy that was on the road 300 days a year.
He's a family guy. He liked going home. He liked his family and his friends, and he was a businessman, and he did well in the territory, and he got along well with Vern, and he would sit there and go, why would I make,
X amount of money being on the road 300 days a year when maybe I make half of that, but I'm not on the road all the time. I get to, I'm not stuck in a car all week long. I'm not wrestling every night or six or seven times a week. And, I can sit here and I can go home, with my family every night, and I can sleep in my own bed, and I can still make good money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's going to wrap it up here. A lot going on this week in wrestling. Brian, looks like I'll be joining you and your podcast next week, and we'll talk all the fallout of Survivor Series, see who was right or wrong on their predictions regarding the championship and Roman Reigns. So why don't you take a moment and give yourself as many plugs as you want as to where the good people listening to this podcast today can read and listen to you.
Sure. Well, everybody can just go to betweentheropes.com. You can find the different podcasts there, and also on SoundCloud and on iTunes. And you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Brian Fritz. And you can check out our Facebook page as well if you'd like. Just go to facebook.com/betweentheropes.
Awesome. Well, Brian, it's always been always a good time. And again, we always try and keep these things short, but yet we just start talking and they wind up hitting the time limit draw, hitting curfew, as they would say on the old MSG shows. But no, thanks a lot for joining me here today, and I look forward to coming over to your house next week.
You got it, man.
Thanks.